all poor would prefer to build their asset base through a lending process? Just a valid and interesting question. Do the math. If you're trying to acquire an asset through a loan at our kinds of rates of interest, what does it cost you to buy a tricycle, a $300 tricycle? Well, at the end of the day, if you take into account the interest rates and you take into account the transaction costs of coming and sitting under the banyan tree for a couple hours or an hour each week, and the lost opportunity cost that represents in terms of the other things you could be doing potentially to earn income, and the bus you got to take and the bus you got to take home, that becomes a pretty expensive way to buy a tricycle. What if somebody had access to a deposit account with very low transactions cost because in the village you have some way to drop cash off somewhere on your way to school? You can actually acquire these same assets for half the value. Pretty interesting, huh? I don't know. It's worth doing some thinking about. So, you can see a little bit of a focus on savings by now. You're getting that message, I assume, right? Okay. So why now? Why this focus on savings now? I mean, I studied in Ohio State with Bob Vogel, the forgotten half of finance, development finance, I guess it was, back in 80. You probably wrote that thing in 80, 81 or something, right? And then Maria writes A Handful of Rice for Acción, and some years later, and still today, savings seems to be a great big new discovery. So why now bring this back onto the table if we haven't done particularly well as a community on the whole sort of savings front? Well, it seems like there might be a fairly unique moment in history where technology and developments of the last few years may actually help us address the complex problems associated with mobilizing and managing low balance deposit accounts and other sorts of financial services. And I don't mean by the photo just to signify that it's only cell phones or something. It's just technology in general may actually have the ability to transform our opportunities in the whole financial services area in a really exciting way. So when we sit around the Gates Foundation trying to be awful strategic about stuff, we're told by the bright people who do this for a living that you're supposed to find something called key drivers. What is it that really makes a difference? Not sort of the laundry list of the 5,000 things you could do that would all be helpful, but rather, strip away all the things that would be helpful or that are going to happen if something else, gets done first, and try and get down to what are the really, really basic things, the most important things that if you could change them would really change the landscape out there and enable all sorts of other good stuff to happen. Okay? And I enjoy that process personally. One of the things we've come to, if not the single most important thing we've come to, is costs. Costs in our business are why we got into it in the first place with philanthropic capital 30 years ago, or maybe 60, I don't know, depending on which iteration of this you're thinking about. Why? Because this was too costly for banks. Well, that reality hasn't changed on the low balance deposit accounts. It's still why Western Union, charges 25 or 30% to send money. It's still why they don't do a lot of our kind of loans. At the end of the day, really costs are an absolute driver in our ability to make a full range of financial services available to as many poor people as possible. If you could sort out costs, whole bunches of other things fall in place. And I do mean to refer to two kinds of costs. When I look